Taylor. So to start off with, we have Dr. Frankenfurter, played by Tim Curry, who seems to be the main character. We have his three minions, Riff Raff, Magenta, and Columbia, played by Richard O'Brien, Patricia Quinn, and Little Nell. And of course, we have the engaged couple, Janet Weiss, played by Susan Sarandon, and Brad Major, played by Barry Bostwick. Of course, we have the seminal Rocky, played by Peter Hinwood, and Dr. Scott, their college professor, played by Jonathan Adams. Brief synopsis. So Brad and Jenna end up getting engaged, and they go to see Dr. Scott. And they end up stumbling across Dr. Frankenfurter's mansion. They become party to his presentation of his experiment and the group's elaborately queer rituals. At which point, Eddie ends up coming out of deep freeze and causes chaos, dampening all the celebrations. Eventually, Frank seduces both Brad and Janet, which leads to Janet seducing Rocky in a very vulnerable position. Now, Dr. Scott, who is now a UFO investigator for the federal government, ends up coming, searching for Eddie, and Magenta ends up putting on a nice dinner for them all. Frank turns all of them, except for Riff Raff and Magenta, into statues and dresses them in drag for the final score. However, Magenta and Riff Raff come in, and they kill Columbia, Frank, and Rocky with a laser, and then the whole castle blasts off to bring them all home. Now, the source of the film is based on Richard O'Brien's own Rocky Horror Show, a play written in order to stave off boredom for one winter. It's an ode to B-movies and sci-fi and horror of the 1930s through the 70s, and I believe it's awfully exact to his original vision. Key players end up being Richard O'Brien, who wrote, directed, acted in, and Jim Sharman, who produced and directed some of it as well. Now, Sue Blaine also created the costumes, which originally took a lot of inspiration from the UK glam movement of the era and helped change international punk fashion throughout the 1980s. Tim McCurry anchored the whole movie with a flamboyantly believable posh personality, which I believe is the reason that all of this campiness works. And then Tim Deegan, who was an executive over at Fox, ended up seeing the success of many other counterculture midnight showings and opting to put Rocky Horror Picture Show up as a midnight picture that led to its long-term success. Now, the film techniques, there wasn't much time and no chance to reshoot. It was shot at Oakley Court and Hammer Studios, which created many of O'Brien's favorite B films. And with 5 weeks and one stage, the cinematography didn't have much time to develop and create these complex scenes. However, many of the scenes pay homage to the hallowed grounds that they were filming on, showing wide open set pieces that are gaudy and absurd with different props that are classic to the B-movie era. And then with the narrator, or the criminologist here, grounding this contrast of absurdity into the cliches of these classical films, it reinforces the genuine campiness of the entire film. Throughout the film, it's filmed with a lot of shaky and handheld footage whenever there's chaos or great emotional distress that breaks out, usually focusing on Frankenfurter himself or just the faces of those who are in the middle of the effect, which helps achieve this maximally dramatic and over-the-top effect when mixed with the ostentatious acting. Critical exception was originally terrible. Reviewers hated it, box office was a flop. However, once it was turned into a midnight showing, they found that people came back week after week after week, and it has since led the longest theatrical release ever, limited as it may be. It was shortly inducted into the Library of Congress and frequently considered one of the great cult classics ever. Is it worth it? I believe it definitely is. It's weird and wandering at first, but it gives way to these deeper themes and messages that ambush audiences with meanings and morals. Ambiguous and multifunctional, but, however, powerfully honed, that provide a lot of food for thought and cements it as a timeless piece of queer culture that can and has become a rallying cry unifying many once distant communities. Here's my sources. Thank you.